August 1969. A quiet dairy farm in Bethel, New York, was about to become the epicenter of one of the most extraordinary and chaotic events in human history. What was planned as a modest music gathering for 50,000 people exploded into something far beyond anyone's imagination. Nearly 500,000 souls descended on Max Yaska's farmland, turning rolling green fields into a sea of humanity unlike anything America had ever witnessed. We've all seen the romanticized version of Woodstock, the peace signs, the flowers, the iconic performers. But hidden within the archives of 1969 are photographs that tell a far more complicated, raw, and unfiltered story. Some of these images are shocking. Some are heartbreaking. Some reveal truths about human nature that the festival's legendary reputation tends to overshadow. These are the photos Woodstock's legacy doesn't always lead with, images not suitable for all ages, and stories that deserve to be told in full. Before the crowds arrived, before the mud and the music and the madness, there was simply a farm. Max Yaska was a dairy farmer, hard-working, practical, deeply rooted in the traditions of rural New York. When festival organizers approached him about using his 600 acres of land, he agreed, driven by a genuine belief in what the young generation was trying to say to the world. Yaska reportedly told the gathered crowd words that would echo through history, that their gathering, if embraced with the right spirit, could transform America's deepest problems into hope for a more peaceful future. It was an extraordinary statement from an ordinary farmer standing at the edge of something he could not have fully predicted. But his generosity came at a steep personal cost. His neighbors were furious. Legal threats followed. The community that had known Yaska for years turned against him. His farm, his livelihood, his reputation, all became collateral damage in the cultural earthquake that was Woodstock. He passed away in 1973, just 4 years after the festival, never fully escaping the controversy his decision had ignited. The early photographs of his farm, peaceful, open, ordinary, carry a quiet sadness when you know what came next. Woodstock Ventures, the company behind the festival, had built fences. Ticket booths were constructed. A proper system of entry and crowd management was designed and ready to go. On paper, it looked organized. In reality, it collapsed almost immediately. The organizers had anticipated roughly 50,000 attendees. What arrived was closer to 450,000. The fences, meant to define boundaries, not imprison anyone, were simply overwhelmed. People climbed over them, squeezed through gaps, or simply walked around them in areas where the barriers hadn't been completed. Security was understaffed by a magnitude that nobody had planned for. The photographs of those broken fences and abandoned ticket booths capture a moment of organizational failure that, paradoxically, became one of Woodstock's defining stories. Facing the impossible reality in front of them, the organizers made a remarkable decision. They declared the festival free. What had begun as a commercial event became, by necessity, an open gathering. It was either that or watch the situation spiral into something dangerous. The images of those fences, bent, bypassed, and ultimately irrelevant, are among the most telling photographs from the entire event. While the performers were being flown in by helicopter, the concertgoers were trapped in what has been described as one of the worst traffic jams in New York State history. For miles in every direction, cars sat motionless on narrow rural roads that had never been designed to handle anything close to this volume of traffic. The New York State Thruway was effectively paralyzed. Some people abandoned their vehicles entirely. They grabbed their bags, their sleeping rolls, their food supplies, and they walked. Miles and miles on foot, under a relentless summer sun, through heat and dust, just to reach a field where music was playing. The photographs of those highways, stretching back as far as the camera could see, filled with cars sitting abandoned on roadsides, look almost apocalyptic. They also reveal something remarkable about the people who made that journey, an absolute, unshakable determination to be part of whatever this thing was becoming. Governor Nelson Rockefeller reportedly considered calling in the National Guard to manage the situation. Sullivan County declared a formal state of emergency. The small towns surrounding Bethel were overwhelmed, their infrastructure buckling under the weight of an influx they were completely unprepared for. And still the people kept coming. Not every resident of Yaska's farm was there by choice. The dairy cows, The actual working animals of an actual working farm had no say in the matter. And the festival, it turns out, affected them profoundly. The relentless noise of amplified music, the constant movement of hundreds of thousands of strangers, the smells and the chaos. It was deeply traumatic for the herd. Reports from the time indicate that Yaska's cows stopped producing milk for an entire month following the festival. For a dairy operation, that is a serious financial blow. Yaska reportedly sought some form of compensation from the festival organizers for the impact on his livelihood. There are photographs from the festival that show farmers attempting to carry out their daily milking routines right in the middle of the chaos. Cows standing in their stalls while festival-goers wander nearby. The mundane and the extraordinary existing side by side. These images are quietly powerful. They remind you that Woodstock didn't happen in a vacuum. It landed on top of someone's real life, someone's actual business, someone's daily routine. The cows in those photographs look confused, and understandably so. If you've ever spent time outdoors during a serious summer storm in upstate New York, you understand what the festival grounds became when the skies opened up. The fields that had seemed spacious and green turned into vast sheets of mud. Tents collapsed. Paths became rivers. People who had packed light, or hadn't packed at all, found themselves utterly exposed to the elements. And yet, the photographs from those wet, muddy days are some of the most joyful images in the entire Woodstock archive. People are laughing. People are sliding. People are covered head to toe in mud, and apparently having the time of their lives. The rain, rather than destroying the festival spirit, seemed to intensify it. There was a collective decision, not made by any organizer or announcer, but made spontaneously by hundreds of thousands of individuals simultaneously, to simply embrace the discomfort and keep going. Some people had the foresight to bring plastic ponchos. They became unlikely fashion statements. Others just got wet and stayed wet. The mud-soaked photographs from Woodstock's rainy days have become iconic for a reason. They capture human resilience in its most unpolished, authentic form. Yaska's farm was a dairy operation. It was not a campground. There were no designated sleeping areas, no organized tent zones, no clear guidance on where 450,000 people were supposed to lay their heads at night. Some people had come prepared with proper camping gear. Many had not. The photographs from nighttime and early morning at Woodstock tell a story of extraordinary improvisation. People slept in their cars when they could find them, which was its own challenge given the sea of vehicles spread across the surrounding roads and fields. People fashioned makeshift shelters from whatever materials they had. Clothing stretched over sticks, plastic sheeting propped up with branches, sleeping bags laid directly on open ground with no protection above. One image that has endured from the festival shows people asleep, in sleeping bags on the open ground, completely exposed. It's a tender image in some ways, the vulnerability of sleep, strangers resting alongside strangers in perfect peace. But it also captures the sheer lack of preparation that defined Woodstock's infrastructure. Nobody had planned for this many people. Nobody could have. The organizers had provided 600 portable toilets for the festival. 600 for 450,000 people. That works out to roughly one toilet for every 650 attendees, a ratio that, under any circumstances, would be considered a serious failure of planning. Under the specific circumstances of Woodstock, summer heat, no running water, a crowd that was eating and drinking continuously, it became a genuine public health concern. Lines for the portable toilets stretched on for what felt like hours. The facilities themselves deteriorated quickly. Many people simply gave up on the official toilets entirely and found other solutions in the surrounding fields and woods. The photographs of those long toilet lines, patient and stoic despite everything, capture a particularly unglamorous reality of what it actually meant to be at Woodstock. It's one of those images that the festival's mythology tends to skip past quickly, but it's an honest image. It shows what it really looked like to be one of 450,000 people sharing a space that was designed for a fraction of that number. Not every photograph from Woodstock tells a story of peace and freedom. Some images document the festival's genuinely tragic moments, the darkness that existed alongside the joy. Drug use was widespread and visible throughout the festival grounds. Photographs show people in various states of intoxication, signs advertising marijuana, and the general atmosphere of a gathering where the counterculture's embrace of recreational substances was fully on display. For many attendees, this was an expression of freedom. For others observing from outside, these images confirmed their deepest fears about what the youth counterculture represented. The festival's 2 reported deaths cast a permanent shadow over its legacy. One young man died of a heroin overdose, a tragic reminder that the substances circulating through the festival grounds were not all benign. Another attendee was killed in a devastating accident, struck by a tractor while sleeping in a sleeping bag in a field. These deaths, captured indirectly in the record of the festival, represent the human cost of an event that was, in many ways, operating beyond any reasonable safety framework. A food vendor who raised the price of a hamburger from 25 cents to $1 reportedly had his stand burned down by an outraged crowd. The photographs of charred remains in the middle of a peace festival carry a complicated message. Even in a gathering built around ideals of love and harmony, hunger and frustration could push people toward destruction. But here's what makes Woodstock genuinely remarkable, and what the photographs ultimately record more than anything else. When the system failed, the people didn't. Local communities that had initially feared the festival's attendees, that had looked at the approaching crowds with suspicion and alarm, found themselves opening their homes, their kitchens, and their resources to strangers. Photographs show local women handing out food at roadsides. Community organizations set up impromptu feeding stations. The Army, the very institution that many Woodstock attendees were actively protesting against, given the ongoing war in Vietnam, airlifted medical supplies, food, and even performers into the festival grounds. The organizers, acknowledging the deep irony of accepting military assistance at an anti-war festival, reportedly reassured the crowd that the soldiers were there to help, not to police. It was a genuinely strange and genuinely human moment. Ideological opponents cooperating in a crisis because cooperation was the only option that made sense. The photographs of those feeding lines, those spontaneous acts of sharing, those moments of strangers caring for strangers, are the images that have lasted longest in Woodstock's legacy. They represent something that no amount of organizational planning could have produced. They represent people at their instinctive best. When the music stopped and the crowds began the long, painful process of leaving, again stuck in miles of traffic, again walking for hours to reach abandoned vehicles, the farm that remained looked nothing like the farm that had existed 3 days earlier. The environmental aftermath was severe. Photographs taken in the days following the festival show hills carpeted in garbage, fields churned into mud and debris. The landscape of Yaska's farm transformed almost beyond recognition. A report published in the Village Voice at the time described piles of waste stretching across the hillsides that lingered for a full month after the event. Local residents photographed cleaning the streets outside their homes, sweeping away the remnants of 450,000 visitors. Yaska refused to host another festival on his land. The town eventually passed legislation specifically designed to prevent a repeat occurrence. The environmental cost of Woodstock, rarely discussed in the festival's romantic legacy, was real and significant. What does it mean that we still talk about Woodstock more than 5 decades later? The photographs from that weekend in August 1969, the shocking ones, the beautiful ones, the heartbreaking ones, the ones that don't fit neatly into any mythology, collectively tell the story of a genuinely unrepeatable moment. It was chaotic, underprepared, at times dangerous, and often deeply uncomfortable. It was also, by nearly every account of those who were there, profoundly and unforgettably alive. The photographs preserve both truths simultaneously: the mud and the music, the tragedy and the transcendence, the failure of planning and the triumph of human connection. Woodstock 1969 was not suitable for all ages. It was not suitable for the faint of heart, the underprepared, or anyone who needed things to go according to plan. But it was, in its messy and complicated and extraordinary way, a moment when nearly 500,000 people chose to believe, briefly, stubbornly, together, that something better was possible. That belief, captured in photographs that have now outlasted nearly everyone who appeared in them, is what Woodstock ultimately left behind. If you found this journey through history compelling, share your thoughts below. Which moment from Woodstock resonates with you most? And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world.